I've been super abundantly blessed by being with a group of men this weekend. From the seminars to the music today to the fellowship. This has just been enriching and rewarding. Imagine what it would have been like with a group of men on that first day of creation. I want to, rather than read the text to you, I want to go through with you the story that's found in the book of Genesis. Thank you. Can you imagine Adam opening his eyes for the first time? He's got no context, no history. Everything he sees for the first time. Now, I don't know what the first thing he saw was, but I like to imagine it was his Creator, Jesus, who is standing there by his side. And the first thing he sees is Jesus. And then Jesus kind of walks him through the garden and shows him all the wonderful plants and animals. And I'm sure Jesus hung around to the end of the day and watched that first sunset with him. And then Adam got to name all the animals. And I don't know where he came up with these names. I can only imagine. You know, Adam being a young man, I'm sure he had a little bit of competitive juices, so I'm sure he challenged one of the cats to a race, and the cat beat him. And he looked at him and he said, "You cheated." I think there's something in the Hebrew-English translation there, I don't know. Or he might have gotten into a debate with another one of the cat families, and at the end he says, "That can't be right, you're lying." And how did he ever come up with butterfly? Did he have an argument at breakfast and some of the butter, and I could see Adam just enjoying this, naming all the animals and loving life and watching the elephants and the giraffes and the aardvarks and the orangutans all playing together with him. But, at some point in time, he noticed something. They were all nicely paired, but him. And I'm not sure how this discussion got raised, but I'm sure there was some conversation with Christ about what was the plan behind this. And Jesus smiled and he said, "I've got that fixed." And the first surgical procedure ever performed was performed on Adam as he was anesthetized, put asleep. And a rib was pulled out and formed. And when Adam woke up, imagine the first time he woke up, he saw Jesus and all the animals. This time he wakes up, and who does he see? And so the first words out of his mouth, and I'm not sure if he spoke Hebrew or what the language was, but I can tell you, I'm sure this was it. He said, "Whoa, man! You gotta be kidding me." And of course today it's woman. And as they together continue to explore this world, you remember God said, "Enjoy it. Eat of the fruit. Enjoy the garden. But one tree, in the midst of thousands of trees, I want you to stay away from." And for a while, we don't know how long, days, weeks, months, years, centuries, whatever that time period was, Adam and Eve enjoyed the beauty of the garden. And then, you know the story. You know it too well. Eve walks by herself, wanders through the garden, and hears a voice calling her name. And as she followed that voice, she discovered it was coming from a serpent in the tree. This startled her a little bit because she wasn't used to serpents talking in her language. And as she listened, the serpent subtly drew her into some conversation and asked her the obvious question, "Aren't you curious about where I learned to talk?" And then Eve said, "Well, yeah, that kind of crossed my mind." She's engaging the serpent when God said, "Stay away." And the serpent said, "Let me tell you how I got this voice. God is holding back from you. He held back from me, but I by eating of the fruit of this tree, I gained a knowledge that God was withholding from me, and because of that, I can now speak. Imagine what this fruit can do for you. And in a very subtle way, the issue was not eating the fruit. The issue was, will you trust God or not? And Eve chose to have something that she believed God withheld, and so she took a bite. I got to tell you from my own experience, there's nothing better than eating a piece of hot pie that your mom told you not to eat. For a moment. When it's sitting there, and of course it's at its peak, when it's still warm from the oven. The problem with pie is, if you take a scoop out, it's hard to hide it. You can't cover it with the crust because you've already broken the crust. You can't take the innards and kind of smooth it over because they're supposed to be inside, not outside. And so you will get caught. And Eve was caught. But before Christ came down, she ran to her husband and encouraged him to eat of the fruit. And she said, I saw a talking serpent, and he talked because he ate. And he told me that if we ate, we would be so much smarter, that we would be beyond what God has created us now. And Adam, still swirling with the wow man, decided he didn't want to live without her, and he too partook of the fruit. Now here's where the story gets real interesting. Every evening, so there was a period of time before they ate of the fruit, because they were used to the routine. Every evening, Christ would come down in the cool of the evening and commune with them. Remarkable. The God of the universes, with thousands of inhabited worlds, always came down every evening to help Adam and Eve grow into their environment. Do you think God was fooled by the presence of sin? No. That was anticipated long before any of God's creation ever existed. But now it was real. And God came down ready and wanting to offer his forgiveness. The plan was all laid out. And now was the opportunity to say, I know you have sinned. And because of your sin, I'm going to exclude you from the garden, but I will provide a sacrifice for you, and you shall be redeemed. And so Christ was fully prepared in this evening for the first time to lay out to Adam and Eve the plan of redemption, the way of forgiveness. But there was someone else that anticipated that too. Satan knew that Christ wouldn't let go of his children easy. Satan knows that for every truth, if he can manufacture a slight variation away from that truth, to make it sound doable, but it will ultimately fail. And so if God was going to give us forgiveness, I can guarantee you Satan had a substitute. And so I want to reveal to you this morning what that substitute was. You're familiar with the story. When Christ talked to Adam and Eve and looked at Adam and said, Adam, what just happened? What did Adam say? The woman you made. What do we call that today? Blame. The substitute for forgiveness that Satan brought forward is when something goes wrong, I figure out who to blame, whose fault it is. I've seen churches crumble as they fight with each other as to whose fault the predicament we're under is. I've seen families fall apart because blame substituted for forgiveness. And when God went to Eve, what did she say? The serpent. So Adam blames Eve, Eve blames the serpent, and if God would have gone to the serpent, what would the serpent have said? The devil made me do it. Okay? So blame is a false substitute for forgiveness. What do we do when we've been hurt by someone? We blame. I told you last night my story of going into work and being re-engineered. I blamed that president for my circumstances. Every time we get stuck in our miserableness, you can rest assured that blame is there somewhere, because blame gets us stuck, forgiveness gets us out. We'll go on with this. So note the difference. Blame is Satan's way. Forgiveness is God's way. Amen. That's important to understand, because oftentimes we use blame when we have been wrong. So, I'll ask you the question. When you have been wrong, what do you choose? Is forgiveness the first thing that comes to mind? Or is blame the first thing that comes to mind? I'm going to suggest that after thousands of years of degeneration, that we are creatures of habit and that we automatically default to blame, because it's what we grew up with, is what we're used to. We blame people for our problems, our circumstances, and we need to move beyond. From the beginning of time, mankind has chosen blame over forgiveness, and it still doesn't work. So I want, if there's a clear takeaway from this morning's message, it's to stop blaming. It is the devil's tool. And to start forgiving as a way of moving on. Every time you have been hurt, you have a choice to make. To forgive or not to forgive. Can I borrow from the English tradition for a moment and become a little Shakespearean with you? To forgive or not to forgive? That is the question. And that is the question you only can answer. When you have been hurt, what leaps in front of you? Blame or forgiveness? When you have been wronged, what do you choose? To remain bitter or to get better? Blame retains the bitterness. Forgiveness brings a better life. It's that simple, and yet we fail to realize sometimes that the gift God comes down in the cool of the evening to give us is not the gift we're looking for. And so, like Adam and like Eve, when confronted with problems, we find out, we seek who to blame. Most don't think of forgiveness when they've been harmed. In fact, for many people, it doesn't even come to mind. And I'm hoping as a result of this weekend, as you men leave this place and go back to the grind and sometimes the ugliness of life, that you will bring a new tool to deal with life's difficulties. And that you will think of, how do I apply forgiveness to this? How do I make forgiveness effective in this situation? The reason for this is the past feelings have a faster pathway to your brain than thoughts. So I'm already feeling upset before I'm thinking about what I should do. And so I'm encouraging you to be thoughtful and to recognize that forgiveness is God's way. Think of it this way. Stimulus response. You remember studying that in when you took a class in psychology in college or somewhere? And they talked about Pavlov's dogs, and they rang a bell, and every time the dogs heard the bell, they salivated because that stimulus was conditioned to a response. We need to rise above the animal kingdom and not react to what happens to us. We've got to get thoughtful. And forgiveness is that thought process. Anger and blame is simply reaction. So I want to give you an illustration. I think this is a very practical way to get us understanding the difference between thinking and consciousness and acting and unconsciousness. So it's a very simple illustration. So I want you to take your hands and simply fold them together like that. Very simple. Okay? Now I want you to look down and see which thumb is on the top. Is it the left thumb or the right thumb? So I want to raise the hands. So how many have the right thumb on top? Raise your hands. Wow, quite a few of you. How many have the left thumb on top? Wow, Quite a few of you. If you could see what I see, you'd see it's roughly 50-50. It has nothing to do with whether you're left-handed or right-handed. Because you know there's a lot more right-handeds than there are left-handeds. It has nothing to do with that. Now let me ask you a question. When I told you to fold your hands, how many of you stopped and thought for a moment and said, I think I'll put the right thumb on top? Anyone? Not one? So how did you decide which thumb to put on top? You didn't think about it, did you? It was simply an unconscious habit. So now I want you to be conscious. If your left thumb was on the top before, I want you to put your right thumb on top, or vice versa. So do it that way, would you please? And tell me, what does that feel like? Listen, why would anyone in the world do it that way? And yet half the people in the world do. We go to blame without thinking about it. And I'm asking you to do it just the opposite way. And I recognize it's going to be uncomfortable at first. I never said forgiveness was easy. I simply said it was important. It is critically important. In fact, remember the Lord's Prayer last night? Without forgiveness, there is no way to salvation. You know, I often wondered, why did Christ say what he said when he said, and if you don't forgive your fellow man, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. That sounds a little harsh to me. It almost sounds like salvation by works. I have to forgive in order to earn God's forgiveness. And I have to tell you, the Bible is consistent. So this cannot be a works to salvation, because then it would do away with the rest of the scriptural teachings. So why would God put it in that language? I don't think God was saying, I won't forgive you unless you forgive. Rather, what I think God was saying is, if you don't forgive others, that's the surest sign that you've not received my forgiveness. Therefore, you are not forgiven, not because I don't want to, not because you have to earn it, but if you don't understand the blessing of forgiveness, then you haven't received it. It's that simple. So it's not a work to earn, it's an evidence of. People who have been forgiven, forgive. Why? Because we discovered last night, in fact, let me quote one author. It said, forgiveness can almost be considered a selfish act because it benefits the one forgiving so much more than the one forgiven. Because when I forgive, I let go of the bitterness and resentment and grudge and all that I've held within. I am set free. And so the Lord's statement there that says, if you've been set free, you are free indeed. Remember his parable about the debtor that was set free? And then what did he do? He went out and found someone who owed him money and said, pay me or I'll throw you in jail. And when the king found out, what did he do? He put him back in jail. Forgiveness, if we truly understand it, is such a blessing, then why would we want to hold on to bitterness to someone else? Why would we be tempted by the devil to blame other people when we can get free of the whole situation? You see, there are two types of choices you can make, conscious and unconscious. And if you don't think about it, you will fall into the devil's trap and you will start blaming others for your circumstances. And you'll start resenting them for what they've done to you. But if you think about it, you can choose forgiveness. So rather than stimulus response, just doing things without thinking, I want to add something between stimulus and response and call it reflection, call it meditation, call it prayer. But before I respond, I think, I pray, I ask for God's guidance, and then I choose my response. That's the nature of forgiveness. It gives me the ability to be human and choose my response as opposed to being like the rest of the animal kingdom and reacting to my environment. Viktor Frankl put it this way. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lays our freedom and power to choose our response. Can I interpret that? Ellen White says we should be praying without ceasing. We should be praying every moment. And you know, in my Christian walk, I remember trying to do that. And all of a sudden I realized that for the last 10 minutes I hadn't been praying. I feel like I failed. And so I'd start praying again. And I found it impossible to pray every moment. Until I realized that prayer is not necessarily verbal expression of words and sentences constantly. But it's being in that moment that I recognize that I'm always choosing. And in those choices, I'm praying. And you know what? That brings those choices into consciousness. When you have been wronged, there are two possible pathways. One is, you are responsible for my pain. Blame. So you must do something to make me feel better. After all, you caused it. And if you refuse to help me, I'll resent you. And that leads down to a victim. I am stuck in my misery until you do something for me. I'd like to suggest another pathway. I'm responsible for my happiness, so I must make choices and act in ways that are best for me. And no matter what you do, I am free to forgive and live life my way. Amen. Now you can be a victor. Freedom frees. Forgiveness frees. Blame entraps. And remember that. Christ's purpose is to set us free, to make us human. Satan's purpose is to keep us trapped and miserable. When I forgive, I take responsibility for my life. Responsibility. The ability to choose my response. Let's be responsible forgivers. Life is defined by the choices you make, not by the circumstances you are dealt. So many people think I am what I am because of the things that have happened to me. Christ was what he was because of the choices he made. Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? There was a lot of circumstances that Christ had to deal with. The rumors about illegitimate birth. Who was his real father? The accusations made against him. The life he had to live was not a result of his circumstances, but as a result of the choices. Remember, it's choice, not chance, that determines your destiny. Amen. Are you choosing forgiveness? With forgiveness, your life is no longer defined by the past others have made for you, but by the choices you make today. Note the difference. Blame, another person needs to act. Forgiveness, you need to act. Forgiveness is putting you in control of your life. That's why Jesus said, why would you accept my forgiveness and then turn around and withhold it from someone else? It doesn't make sense because it puts you right back in prison. I just set you free and you're going right back into the prison. So that's why Christ challenged us to live the forgiving life. When I grew up, I don't know if any of you ever saw this. In the 60s, these were popular. There was one in our house just like that. And every morning at the breakfast table, we would have a discussion about who goes in the doghouse. And the person who did the most bad things the day before got elected to go in the doghouse. Well, and so in my family, there was a mother and a father and 3 children. So it was exactly like that doghouse. Do you know that I spent the majority of my childhood in the doghouse? Unbelievable. We would take a vote every morning, and they had a huge list of things I did wrong. And, I can think of one thing that my sister might have done wrong, or one thing, but I didn't have a list. And so I'd go in the doghouse. And here's the irony. Once we figured out who to blame, problem solved. We didn't really solve things. We just blamed people, put them in the doghouse, and went on. Here's the point. Blame never solves a problem. Only forgiveness can solve our problems. The problem with blame is it focuses on what the other person needs to do, thus placing your life on hold until they act. Blame is about shifting responsibility. Forgiveness is about taking responsibility. By the way, what is responsibility? The ability to choose my response. We blame so easily. I walk in the house. I do this almost unconsciously. I go, Arda, where are my glasses? You know, I never used to wear these things, so I just set them down, then I get wandering, and I don't forget where I set them down. And as soon as I say, where are my glasses, you know what her response is? I don't wear your glasses. Don't blame me. Go find them yourself. You see, we blame in so many subtle ways, over and over again. In my book, I have a chapter, My Life is Your Fault. And here's how we get there. It's all your fault. It's your fault for how I feel. I'm upset because of what you did. It's your fault for the misery of my life, and I'm going to continue to be miserable until you apologize. My life is your fault. And every time we go down this pathway, the devil smiles. You know why he smiles? Because we're trapped. He's got us. We're in a cage and we can't get out. And I have pastored churches, I have counseled with families that have been trapped for years and years and years. And they can't get out. And they're looking for someone to help them. They're looking for someone to open the door for them. And in the meantime, they have the key in their pocket the whole time. And that key is called forgiveness. And when you open the door of bitterness, when you stop the blame, when you simply say, I'm going to let go and move on, you are the one that benefits. When was the last time the person who harmed you reached out to genuinely help you? Stop and think about it. It doesn't happen very often. So why are you waiting for them to do that? Why do you hold on to your resentment when you can let go of it and live a life you want to live? Forgiveness is the thing that sets you free. If your life, it's going a little too fast. If your life is trapped in misery, it is your responsibility to do something about it. I like this quote from John Burroughs. A man can fail many times, but he isn't a failure until he begins to blame somebody else. In fact, a real man recognizes that he will fail. If you're not trying, then you're avoiding that risk of failure. Real men will fail, and when you fail, you can be forgiven. So keep on the journey. Don't stop, don't quit, don't get discouraged, don't get overwhelmed. The first step, and perhaps the hardest step, to stop the blaming is to re-examine your view of the other as all bad. Let me explain this. I have seen this over and over again. Someone's best friend becomes their worst enemy. What just happened? It's the same person. Or people get married. They're in love. And then they go through divorce. They hate each other. What happened? You see, I've learned that every person is a mixture of good and bad. Now, the ratios can be different, okay? But everybody's a mixture of good and bad. Nobody is all good. The Bible says there is none perfect, no, not one. Nor is there anyone that is all evil, except the devil. But other than the devil, I don't know anyone that's committed the unpardonable sin. We all have a chance. So whether someone is good or whether someone is bad depends on what you focus on. And so when you're in love, guess what you focus on? All their good characteristics. I gotta share this story. My daughter's first date. You know, I want my daughter to date the nicest guy in the school, right? Don't fiddle with those guys. So what does my daughter do? She picks someone not on my A-list for her first date. And so she brings him home to introduce, because I insisted, this was a school event. I wanted to meet him. And so what do? Rather than just being nice and gentle, I start grilling. Now, I was questioning, but my daughter thought I was grilling the poor guy. And I had done some homework on him. And discovered he had some faults. And I started to bring out those faults and say, can you explain to me this? And tell me why you did that? My daughter got so embarrassed, she walked out of the room, and I realized I think I went a little too far. But I was trying to help her to see his faults, because I knew that love was blind, right? And love is blind because it only sees the good in someone when everyone else can see their faults. And it's not until you've been married to the person for a couple of years you go, what was I thinking? Because now you're focusing on the faults. And here's the irony. You finally you say, I hate this person, look at all their faults. And you divorce them. And guess what happens? Someone else falls in love with that person. I've seen it. It happens. How does someone else fall in love with that person when you know for a fact how bad they are? They looked at their good characteristics. So your best friend can become your worst enemy, can become someone else's best friend. Simply by what you choose to look at. So let me give you a corollary here. Love is not the only thing that is blind. Anger is equally as blind. When I am upset at someone, guess what I see? Only their faults. That's all I see. When I blame someone, listen, we can tell stories here because it's just a bunch of guys. Sometimes when my wife gets upset at me, it's unbelievable. She starts down a litany of my faults. The problem is, she goes back to 1990. In 1990 you did this, in 91 you did this, in 93 you did this, in 97. She says, are you getting the point? You got a problem. And not only is this a problem, but while we're on the topic, let me bring up 4 more problems that you have. And all of a sudden, by the time she's done, I'm thinking, what in the world are we doing married together? She must hate me. And I kind of cower a little bit, and I say, I'm a terrible person. What do you want to do? And she says, no, you don't understand. I still love you. But when she's angry at me, anger is just as blind as love. So what is this saying? Be careful of how you judge others. Be careful of blame. Because when you're in a blaming mood, you only see the bad in that person. I've never heard somebody blaming someone and point out all their good characteristics. I've never seen it. And yet, every one of us is a mixture of good and bad. What does forgiveness do? When God looks at us in His grace-filled, forgiving way, is He focusing on our bad characteristics, or is He focusing on our good characteristics? He's not only focusing on our good characteristics, He's also focusing on the potential of what we can be. If we'll just accept His grace, we can become even more than what we are. In fact, we can walk into, like Enoch did, walk straight into the kingdom if we'll allow God's grace to fill our lives. Can you imagine if God wanted to blame us? Well, I'll tell you, there is a day coming. It's called the Judgment Day. And God will have to lay out the blame and the facts. He only does it once. Ellen White calls it the strange act of God. Strange in the sense that it's not his normal personality and characteristic. Because God looks for the good. His natural inclination is want to forgive. But when we reach the point where forgiveness no longer touches us, and we no longer respond to God's grace, we no longer care about God's forgiveness, and we want away from all of that, that he then has to acknowledge another reality. So what are you going to do when someone disrupts your life? When someone says something about you that hurts? When someone that you walk up and say hi to turns their back to you and walks away? What are you going to do? You have a choice. You have a choice. I want you to know you have a choice. But the choice is pretty simple. You can forgive or you cannot forgive. That's the only choice you have. In the face of any unpleasant, disruptive event, your only choice is will you forgive or will you not forgive? And based on that choice, a whole consequence of things happen. And if you choose not to forgive, Satan quickly comes in with his counterfeit forgiveness and says, it's their fault. Blame them. Get angry at them. Be upset at them. It's their fault. So now that you know you have a choice, how do you forgive? What do you do? What does it really mean? I mean, I know I should forgive. I came here last night. I know it's good for me. I came here today. I know that it's my choice and that if I don't make it, I'm falling into Satan's trap and I'm soon going to be bitter. Because people who fall into blame don't trust anyone. Everyone's a potential threat. Everyone's out for themselves and they're out to do me in. Everyone on the highway just wants to cut me off. And when you go down that road, your life becomes colored with that orientation. But if you go down the road of forgiveness, there's another world. A world that is but will yet become. And that's the road I want to encourage you to get on. But I can't make you. No one can tell you to do that. You've got to decide to do that on your own. But once you make that choice, then I want to give you a little guidance tomorrow in our last presentation. I want to talk to you about a couple of things that really are the first steps of forgiveness, that really get you on that pathway, some ways of thinking and some things to do, so that you can know with confidence. And I'll even give you a little kind of self-test, so that you can know with confidence that forgiveness is working. Because far too often we try forgiveness only to wake up the next day and say nothing's changed. That person's still miserable and I still don't like them. So how does forgiveness change our world? You won't want to miss that. So my thought today, very simple. To forgive or not to forgive? That is the question.